The storm took him in a blink. Under a sagging tarp, we argued with heaven using a plastic box and stubborn hands. The rain made everything louder, the siren, the shouting, the metronome app ticking a tempo we were trying to lend his heart. Someone had dragged a tarp out of the kit shed, and the world under it smelled like wet rubber and pennies. The tall man on the turf had blue-tinted lips and steam rising off his jersey. Across his ribs, red lines like ferns were blooming, delicate as paint on porcelain. The AD on his chest said it in a voice that didn't care about thunder. Shock advised. Clear, I said, and miracle in itself. They actually did. The button glowed. Electricity snapped. His body rose a fingertip and settled back into the grass. Compress, I said, and they did, hands on his sternum, depth and recoil like a song your bones remember before your brain does. Pulse, our rookie asked, fingers searching at the man's ankle. Neck, I said, not the feet. His legs were winter cold, the kind of cold that lies. The storm counted our pauses flash, then the long animal growl. We kept the metal goal frame behind us, the bleachers empty, phones put away, and we used the sky's trick, electricity, against the problem it made. On the monitor, the rhythm shifted from snow to something messy, which meant closer to alive. I smelled ozone, rain, cut grass. Someone cried. Someone prayed. The fern on his chest deepened, and I told myself that meant the body had decided to keep the lights on. Again if we need it, I said. Load when I tell you. Not yet. How do you steal a man back from the same sky that took him? An hour earlier the shift felt ordinary in the way nights lie. Wet turnout gear lined up under the rig, coffee gone metallic, weather radar open on my phone like a second set of eyes. Our defib's battery sat on a stubborn second bar. I told myself I'd swap it after the next call. I didn't. You never do the small smart thing before the big dumb storm. Dispatch cut through static with a voice that had lost its indoor tone. Lightning strike, soccer field. CPR in progress, multiple exposed. Jules, my partner, was already rolling. They're still out there, she said, glancing at the radar, green and yellow skirt looping back over town like the storm couldn't decide which house to ruin. 2 minutes out, I said, tightening the strap on the monitor. On the field. I've been hypervigilant about scene safety since the summer I held a crew for lightning and a kid died 2 fields over under an aluminum shelter that sang when the storm touched it. There's a letter from his mother in my wallet. Ink bled where tears found it, thanking us for doing everything. It feels like an indictment. It sits behind my ID so I can't forget what rules cost or what hesitation can do. Scene safe doesn't mean scene perfect, my old mentor says in my head every time it thunders. Tonight I let myself believe that and still moved fast. We rolled into a parking lot turned shallow lake. Field lights flickered, making the rain look like iron filings. Bleachers flashed with every strike. Goals glinted like open traps. 2 players held a tarp like a sagging roof. Under it, 3 teammates counted compressions in a chorus so the storm couldn't steal their place. 25, 26, 27, 30/30 rule, I said into the radio. 30 seconds between flash and boom before you pretend the sky is done with you. We didn't have that. Not close. We'll make our own window. Fast sweep for the things that make heroes dead. Standing water, live wires, metal shelters. I tagged a dazed player with blood at one ear and sent him under the concrete lip of the concession stand with the coach. Another bent double and vomiting got a hand on his back and a trash bag. Everyone else got the word you only have to say once like a curse. Back. They moved. The tarp stayed. The tallest player, the one they were working on, lay where the lightning had negotiated him to ground. Someone had stuck AD pads roughly where they belonged. Bless whatever class had taught them to act without waiting for permission from fear. VF, Jules said, eyes on our monitor. Quivering heart. We shocked to reset it. I translated for the circle of faces. Clear, the captain said, eager and correct. Shock. Compress. Bag. Rain tried to sneak under the mask seal. We bullied it back with 2 hands. Pads are peeling, Jules said. The glue on the left pad had given up in the downpour. She towel-wiped a lane on his chest and pressed a new pad home. It stuck with the sound that made me love adhesive as a concept. Battery, I said, noticing the blink of the last bar. The spare lived in the trauma bag sitting across the mud. Rookie bag. Freya sprinted through the puddles and came back with the case clutched to her chest like a baby she'd decided to keep. She clicked the pack in and the screen went from stubborn to smug. A coach tugged my sleeve. Under the awning, he said, pointing to an aluminum lean-to that would make a perfect lightning rod. He's getting soaked. So are we, I said, smiling because you can say no clean and still keep people. That frame's a magnet. We stay here. Make a wall. My crew drifted into position without me naming it, bodies as windbreaks, tarp pulled tight, the storm outside the circle we'd made with our shoulders. Shock number 2 took course quiver to fine. Not good, not bad, just a hard thinking about making up its mind. Jules pushed a clear syringe into the line adrenaline to keep the core fed. The metronome app tapped out its ungenerous truth. Our little tube that measures the air we push out hovered low, climbed with better compressions. The thunder kept time whether we liked it or not. Do more, the coach shouted, and because rage is a kind of grief, I left it alone. We are, I said, not looking up. Tusk pure. I pointed with my chin. You keep everyone off metal. You watch the dazed kid. If he vomits again, turn his head. You hold this tarp like you mean it. Fear craves jobs. I gave them some. Freya, still damp from her battery run, made the rookie mistake. She checked pulses in the place that lies. Nothing, she said, fingers pressing the cold ankle. Legs are liars, I told her. Neck. She pressed too hard, found nothing there either. My own 2 fingers found a shrug of something if I waited longer than training legs. Hard to trust in rain. I filed the mismatch in the part of my brain that collects whispers. By then Lightning had signed its autograph, Lichtenberg figures, thin red fronds branching under his skin over ribs and shoulder, like a leaf traced hard with a pencil. People call them burns. They aren't, not exactly. Lightning paints from the outside in and the inside out at the same time. Skin is its canvas, nerves are its rumor mill. The smell around us, wet wool, metal, grass, the sweet tang after a shock, was a kind of liturgy. Organized rhythm, Jules said. The squiggle had stopped being chaos and started pretending to be sentences. Electricity behaving, pump not. The infuriating in-between. Hold compressions to check, I said. Neck, nothing. Back on. Shock again, I said. The AD obliged like a game show host with impeccable timing. Clear. Shock. Back on it. Breathe, Jules told me, because partners know when you forget. I did. It didn't feel like there was room in my chest for air that wasn't lightning. The storm looped. The goal mouth lit and went dark. The bleachers flashed opinions. Someone on the sidelines started a prayer in the wrong rhythm. 2 others joined on a different line. It sounded like radio static. I don't tell people what to do with their fear. I ask only that they don't hand it to me to carry while my hands are full. Load? Freya asked, eyes wide under wet lashes. After 3, I said. We buy him another try here. The letter in my wallet felt like a hot square through wet fabric. I looked at the man on the tarp. Younger than me by a little. Tall enough to have invited the sky. You can be unlucky and tall at the same time. Shock, I said for the 3rd time. The button lit. We cleared, pressed, and the arc found its path. Ozone again. Rain. Ferns. Then a flicker where flickers matter. There, Jules said, eyes on the line and him at once. The pressure cuff, which had been sulking, found numbers. Our exhaled air number climbed like a timid animal deciding our hands were friendly. Pulse? Neck. Thread. Yes, I said, quieter than I felt. We said the letters like a spell we didn't want to break, RSC. A pulse of his own. Okay, I told everyone and no one. Package. Keep the airway. Split that crowd. We go now. Rain eased a notch, as if the weather had agreed to give us a lane. The ferns were brightest in that half-light, each branch reminding me the body had been borrowed by a bigger current and decided to sign out again with help. Freya stared and forgot to move. "What are those?" she asked as I shoved a vacuum mattress into her hands. "Lichtenberg figures," I said. "Lightning's autograph. They fade." I caught her eye on his feet again, the blue pooled there, marble stillness. "And the legs?" "Keraunoparalysis. Lightning can spasm nerves and tiny arteries. They go cold and seem pulseless. The middle can be okay while the ends lie to you. Treat the person, not the ankles." She nodded. The leaf landed. We slid a board under him, not because spines love boards, but because mud hates stretchers. We wrapped the tarp tighter so rain couldn't steal what we'd just loaned him. Lines looped and taped and looped again. Extra adhesive. A little prayer. The captain hovered, wanting a job big enough to match his fear. "Keep everyone back from metal until the thunder is gone," I told him, pointing at goals and bleachers. "No shelter under frames. If you can hear thunder, you're still in play. Get the kids off." The dizzy guy? Quiet room, doctor. You did everything right. He didn't hear that part. Or he did and couldn't admit it. "We'll certify," he said, as if CPR were a penance. "All of us." "Do that," I said. "And keep that AED charged." I tapped the bystander unit. "She saved his life tonight." We call machines by pronouns when they behave like friends. We carried the tall man to the rig down a lane our bodies made. The siren drowned at the first corner because rain sometimes deadens even the loudest pleas, but we kept talking in checklists because saying the same things in the same order keeps the wheels on. The defib's battery blinked the dare of its last bar again. I touched the spare Jules had snapped in as if it were a talisman. If the rhythm flirted with chaos, we'd swap mid-bounce. We'd borrowed a piece of sky. Now we had to give it back slowly enough that his body didn't refuse it. The box smelled like plastic and adrenaline you can't bottle. I sealed the mask to his face and squeezed a steady breath. His chest rose and fell with our help. The fern painting across his skin looked like a map of somewhere no one should go. I traced one branch in the air. "Okay, big man," I said, a hand on his shoulder because talking to a body that can't talk back is still a kindness. "We've got you." "Status," the ER asked over the radio, trying to sound bored. "Lightning strike, arrest with return of pulse after 3 shocks and bystander CPR," I said. "Breathing assisted. Pressure present thin. Fern skin marks." Another teammate inbound with ear injury. "ETA 8. Hallway's full," the charge nurse said. "We'll make a space." They always do. Jules leaned into the turn. Rain hammered the roof. Lightning bit the horizon. Thunder punched us in the chest. He flinched, just a ripple. His pulse decided to be a better suggestion. The monitor beeped like a row of students reminding a teacher they'd done their homework. "What happens to the legs?" Freya asked. "After. They wake up," I said. "Sometimes fast. Sometimes later. The spasm lets go and the nerves stop remembering the hit. And the ear kit? Eardrum might be torn. Sounds like the C in your skull for a while. People heal." She nodded and, because she counts, said, "How long between first shock and this?" "Minutes," I said. The minutes before us mattered most. I looked at the AD on the floor. They didn't wait. We slid into a bay that smelled like bleach and souls. People made a lane because we made them make it. The charge nurse with a business haircut pointed to a storage alcove that had become a rhesus room. "Here," she said. "Ultrasound coming." She looked at the fern lines, at the rise of his chest, and I watched her do the math, hope, effort, resources, and decide to be kind anyway. "Legs are cold," a resident said, grabbing an ankle like it owed him money. "Lightning spasm," I said. "Don't call time on feet. Listen to the center." He nodded in the way that means I'll look that up later and moved to the neck like a good student. We slid him over. The ER team took our lines like they'd grown there. Jules rattled the handoff clean and short. Someone slid a wand under his ribs and found his heart squeezing, not proudly but undeniably. Relief is a chemical you can smell if you work here long enough. It smells like permission to keep going. "Okay," I said in my head to the sky, the letter in my wallet, and the man not here for his own story yet. "Okay." We stepped back without leaving. That's the unteachable art. How to vacate a circle and still be a wall around it. Rain-cold air from the ambulance bay washed some electricity off my skin. Jules tilted her face up to catch it. Freya folded her hands like she'd remembered a childhood prayer and didn't trust herself to say it. The coach texted the number I'd given him only because he insisted. Did he make it? Tell the boys something. He has a pulse, I wrote. Your CPR mattered. Stay off the field until the thunder is gone. He sent back a photo, sodden players under the concrete lip, eyes huge. They listened. We will certify. Maybe they'll put up the sign, Jules said. What sign? If you can hear thunder, clear the field. Put the AED by the gate, Freya said softly. Yep, Jules said. Right under the sign. We checked one more time, because not checking is how ghosts pay rent in your head. The girlfriend had arrived, soaked hair, jacket now a tarp for tears. 2 fingers on the back of his hand, the way our nurse on the field had done. The brother stared at the fern lines and practiced a joke that wouldn't land for weeks. The coach stood outside the curtain like a bouncer for a bar that serves only air and grief. He's here, I told the coach, different from he's fine. He nodded. So is your AED, I added, and that landed. When we left, the field lights were off, the goals just shapes. The storm moved on to borrow other skylines. Our rig smelled like old rain and the crackle of luck. At a stoplight, thunder muttered toward the highway. I turned my head slightly, sideways, the way you look at stars in city sky. Still counting? Jules asked. Always, I said. In my wallet, the letter weighed what it always weighs. On my tongue, ozone finally became just air. Ahead, the road was wet and black in ours. The ER turned a storage alcove into a room because that's what hospitals do when the weather brings more people than doors. Ultrasound found a squeeze weak, but there. The monitor stopped sounding like someone shaking a jar of nails and settled into a shy beeping that could grow into a habit. We handed off lines, said the time's first shock, second, third, pulse, and stepped back without leaving. That's the trick. Vacate the circle, stay the wall. Legs are ice, a resident said, palming an ankle like it owed him rent. Lightning spasm, I said. Don't call time on the feet. Listen to the middle. He nodded in the universal dialect of I'll look that up later and moved his fingers to the neck like a good student. They wheeled him toward the elevator. ICU upstairs, air warmer up there, lights brighter, nights longer. We trailed to the doorway as if the hall were a beach, and we weren't sure how far we were allowed to go in our boots. The girlfriend arrived with rain braided into her hair and put 2 fingers on the back of his hand without asking anyone what to do. The brother stood looking at the fern lines like a person who'd watched lightning draw on a body and was trying to decide if anger or wonder should win. The coach hovered just outside the curtain like a bouncer for a bar that serves only air and grief. He's here, I told the coach. Not fine, just here. He nodded once and looked relieved and insulted by fate at the same time. We did what medics do when time gives us permission. We went back to the rig and cleaned. Blood, rain, grass, the same 3 genies as ever, rubbed back into bottles. Fresh pads where the old ones had done a day's worth of work in minutes. New towel. Batteries swapped like a promise I should have kept earlier and will keep next time. Jules lined things in the way she likes, right angles, no rattles, because order is a diet we can digest after chaos. Freya sat on the bumper with her hands folded like a kid backstage at a school play, waiting to be told if her line matters. Text the coach had written earlier. I thumbed him now, ICU, pulse, breathing with help. Fern marks fading already. Tell your boys they listened to us and the sky. A bubble appeared. We're clearing the field. I told them why. They said they're all getting certified. Another bubble. Can we visit? I typed later. He needs quiet first. You'll get your turn. The dizzy teammate, the one with the bloody ear, came by on a wheelchair pushed by an orderly with a gentle face. He threw me a thumbs up like he was 12. I gave him the adult version back, 2 fingers at my temple and a nod, and he grinned like we'd swapped jerseys. Back up. Dispatch asked in our ear, reminding us that the world had not paused. We went available and got a nosebleed, a slip and fall, a false alarm that felt like a gift, and a guy who swore a raccoon had whispered his social security number. Night resumed its regular weirdness, but between calls we found ourselves drawn like moths to the light over the ICU doors. In the unit, the room had that heavy quiet that follows a storm. He lay with the ventilator talking for him, a belt of air in a measured cadence, the numbers along the screen running like a line of school children in pairs. His legs, liars earlier, had a little pink dot if you looked sideways, which is how you find stars in a bright city. The girlfriend had a blanket and the stubbornness to use it. The brother had a chair he didn't deserve and sat on anyway. I showed them the fern lines like a tour guide in a museum that had only one painting. They fade, I said, because some promises we get to make without crossing our fingers. We left again because leaving is part of the job too. And then we came back because ghosts try to rent the apartment in your head if you don't check on the living. Night decided it wasn't finished with us. Clouds marched back with the sullen look weather gets when it knows it has already used its best lines. In the ICU, monitors heard the approach before we did and sang their worry. His heart, bullied back into a steady plod, remembered how to throw a tantrum. The line on the screen jagged into a run, and somebody in scrubs said a word that means fast and rude without yelling it. The team moved like muscle memory, a dose of medicine to quiet the wildness. The pads we'd left on his chest still in place like coasters. Clear, someone said with the indoor voice of people who like patience more than drama. One synchronized jolt, not the slam of on-field, more like a tap on the shoulder of a horse that wants to bolt. The line sighed and came back to a walk. The room exhaled as one body. After, I stood in the doorway and traced one of the ferns with a gloved fingertip, not touching, just learning it. The red had gone to pink. The pink would go to nothing. He stayed. I called the coach then. He's here, I said again, because after you say it once it feels like a phrase you can pay on credit. So is your AD, I added, because praise given to the right object travels back to the right people. He made a sound that could have been a laugh if it weren't so tired. Tell the boys to sleep, I said. Tell them the sky isn't the only thing that gets a vote. Days, not weeks. That's how long it took for the tubes to get fewer and the pronouns to get truer. He came off the ventilator before the weekend. First breath on his own hurt him, and he did it anyway. Second breath was better. By the time we went up on Monday, an oxygen cannula traced his face like a fishing line, and he was using it mostly out of politeness. Did we win? He asked me when I appeared at the doorway again with mud dried to a crackle on my boots. His voice had the rasp of a man whose lungs have fought with weather. You did, I said. All of you. He glanced at the girlfriend, who smiled like she had been personally responsible for the scoreboard, and then at his brother, who had learned to look stern and relieved at the same time. What's this? He asked, looking down at his ribs where the fern had been. There was only a ghost now, a map of a country you couldn't visit anymore even if you wanted to. Lightning's autograph, I said. You'll have it in pictures more than on skin soon. He touched the spot with the lightest of taps, reverent and disbelieving. I don't remember, he said, and the sentence broke my heart in its own gentle way. I remember the throw-in. I remember the sound before. Worse than a drum set in a garage. He shook his head. The rest, nothing. You don't need it, I said. We did the remembering. The ICU team had done all the careful math. Muscle enzymes high because electricity is rude. Heart markers up because lightning treats the chest like a door to bang on. CT head clean because sometimes the sky misses what it shouldn't. Ears intact on him, though his teammate would be hearing the sea in one side for a while. His legs, those liars, had apologized and warmed, and when he swung them over the side of the bed with the therapist guarding the gravity, they held him. Keraunoparalysis is the $10 word that means lightning can scare the nerves and vessels into a sulk. Most get over it. I told him that last part. He liked the getting over it part. Everyone does. Discharge came with a folder fat enough to choke a backpack, follow-ups, restrictions, the usual lectures about weather that sound condescending until you've been kissed by a cloud. It also came with a consult card for the specialist whose job is to argue with hearts using wires and wisdom. You'll see the electrician, I said, and he smiled because he, too, likes words that make complicated things sound simple. Can I play again? He asked me, because I wore the story like a jersey and people think the person who carried you on a stretcher also carries permission. Ask the electrician, I said. And the weather. He laughed then, honest and whole. I'll ask the sky politely, he said. See how it goes. The electrician's clinic lived in a building with carpeting too clean for anyone who works the night shift to feel at home. We went on our day off because we'd been invited and because you don't always get to see endings in our line of work. He shook our hands with the firm courtesy of a man who meets a lot of people who don't remember meeting him the first time. He brought up the Hearts movies and showed us where it had scribbled and where it had chosen clean lines again. He explained how lightning scrambles rhythm and how shocks done right and early can unscramble. He didn't give me back the letter in my wallet, but he gave me a sentence I'll keep next to it. We fear lightning for a reason, and we borrow it back when a heart forgets. Return to play? He said maybe. Maybe after tests. Maybe with a promise to treat Thunder like a coach who has earned your respect. Maybe with a club policy that says you clear the field if you can count less than 30 between flash and boom. Maybe with a sign by the gate so people don't pretend they didn't know. Maybe with an AD at the entrance that has its own hook and a battery you can trust. The man we'd shocked nodded through all the maybes and didn't look like he was being denied anything. He looked like someone being given rules in exchange for a life. He looked like a person who would obey a storm out of a new kind of courage. He asked about the fern. The electrician had seen hundreds, maybe 1,000. Sometimes they never show, he said. Sometimes they look like tattoos. They go as quietly as they came. The girlfriend brought a cake shaped like a lightning bolt to the clinic because humans insist on frosting reality. We ate it anyway, laughing sugar into a room that usually serves statistics. The brother showed me a video of the team practicing compressions on a mannequin that looked both too old and too plastic. They're counting too fast, I said. Make them slow down. Good depth, good recoil. If they're sore the next day, you're doing it right. He wrote it down like I'd given him a cheat code. We went back to the field on a Saturday afternoon in a month whose weather had decided to be kind just to prove it remembers how. Kids and pennies raced shapes on the same turf where a storm had tried out its new trick on us. A sign hung by the gate, new enough to shine. If you can hear thunder, clear the field. Under it, a smaller plaque that said AD located here, arrowed to a box that blinked in a welcoming way. The captain saw us and jogged over, his gratitude like a dog that doesn't know how big it is. We got certified, he said without preamble. All of us. He showed me the cards, still warm from lamination. They had taken a photograph with the AD like it was a new teammate. No one had named her. Good. Tools don't need names to be loved. Policy? I asked. He pointed at the sign. Board voted. Half liked it, half didn't. Then they remembered the fern. He rubbed his chest without meaning to. Now everybody nods when the sky talks. The man we'd shocked walked out from the touchline with the coach's vest on, not a jersey. He wasn't playing yet. He would or he wouldn't. The electrician would tell him, and the weather would add its own opinion. He clapped his hands and kids obeyed because he was tall and kind, and those are the two halves of leadership in any age. He saw us and raised a hand without making a scene. We raised ours back. He had the audacity to look perfectly ordinary, which is the bravest look in the world after drama, alive and uninteresting to strangers. Come kick, he called later, and we did something medics almost never do. We stayed for nothing and everything at once. Jules tried a shot on goal and laughed when she scuffed it. Freya, who had carried the battery like a baby and learned the legs can lie, jogged in place for 2 seconds and decided she liked cheering better. I stood in the place on the grass where the tarp had been and felt air move the hair on my arms the way static does when a storm has left the building but not the planet. I put my boot heel down in that spot like a thumbtack in a map and decided to let it be just grass again. A woman came up to me near the bleachers, older than my mother, younger than my fear. "You were on the news," she said, "with the lightning boy." "Just the back of my jacket," I said, trying to keep the conversation small enough to carry. "My granddaughter plays here," she said, pointing at a kid tying her laces too tight. "Thank you for the sign." "Coach, put it up," I said, giving credit where it sticks. We only argued with the storm. She smiled in a way that let me be wrong and right at the same time. "Storms need arguing with," she said, and walked away to hand a hair elastic to the girl who would outgrow this field in a year and remember this afternoon forever. We visited the teammate with the torn eardrum a week later because loose ends tie themselves to you unless you knot them. He stood at the door of his apartment with a tea towel on his shoulder like a bartender in a movie and said, "Huh, a lot," and then sorry for saying huh. We told him he was allowed to be dizzy and mad at the same time. We told him the world would stop sounding like it lived in a shell soon. He said, "What?" And we laughed and he laughed and the echo in his head subsided so he could hear the joke. Jules bought us tacos with our last crumpled cash that night, and we ate them in the rig with the doors open to a breeze that smelled like rain's good twin. Freya asked if the letter in my wallet felt any lighter. I took it out and looked at it without reading it, the way you look at the ocean from the boardwalk when you aren't ready to get your feet wet. "No," I said, "but it doesn't feel heavier either." "You ever going to throw it away?" she asked, not rude, more like a person wondering if ladders ever stop leaning against the same tree. "No," I said. "It lives there. It reminds me to count. It reminds me to move." She nodded, and because she is a medic already, she let the silence do the next job. On my next off day, I drove past the field in sunshine the color of new coins. The sign caught the light and made a promise to anybody who could read. "If you can hear thunder, clear the field." The AD box winked and pretended to be just plastic. The goals looked like goals, not traps. The bleachers looked like seats, not wires. The grass looked like grass. You can teach a place to be just a place again if enough people agree out loud. I keep the electrician's sentence next to the letter now. We fear lightning for a reason, and we borrow it back when a heart forgets. The first tells me to respect the sky. The second tells me to carry a battery and not be precious about wet pads. Between them, there's a lane we can run. A few months later, the man we shocked sent a photo. He was in a different jersey, in a different league, with a different set of storm rolls. He stood at midfield holding a ball he didn't seem to need in his hands and grinning like he'd been given back a minute he hadn't known was missing. Under the picture he'd typed, "First full game back." We won 2-1. Heard thunder after and got everyone off like it was my job. "It is." "Thank you." I sent back, "Send me a video of your team compressions." "Slow down the count." He responded with a middle finger emoji and a smile, and a second later a clip of kids counting in a steady beat you could set a life to. That same night, a new storm built itself tall over the highway, and dispatch gave us a call about a transformer sighing into blue. I stared at the pulse in the clouds the way you look at a dog you're not sure wants to be pet. Jules said, "Still counting," and I said, "Always," and tightened the strap on the monitor the way some people tighten their ponytails before they run. We pulled out into rain that didn't hate us yet and let the wipers do their metronome thing. Somewhere behind us the field lights went off on purpose for once, and somewhere ahead of us a person who had never thought about storms was about to learn something new. My phone buzzed in my pocket with a message from the coach, AD battery replaced. Monthly check on the calendar. We make meaning where weather makes noise. We bolt signs to gates. We put boxes on walls. We teach hands to count to 30 for the right reasons. If you stand in the bay at our station at the right time of night, you can hear thunder walk its boots across the rooftops. It sounds like the end of something. It's not. It's the beginning of a clock you can hear if you listen. 30 from flash to boom, and you play. 20, and you find a roof that won't bite you. 10, and you grab a stranger by the sleeve and say now. And if lightning writes its name on somebody you love, you borrow the sky back and write yours under it until the heart remembers how to sign for itself. When the thunder left that night, his pulse stayed. That's the whole story, really. The rest is paperwork and tacos and batteries and signs and a dozen hands learning to press the right place at the right speed in the rain. The rest is what we do until the next time the sky tries to make a point and we argue back with everything we've carried.